This particular one is going to be really interesting, simply because we're getting into all of the things that pertain to social engineering over the phone. Before we get into that, joining me is the man, the myth, the legend, the inexorable, the unavoidable David Boyd. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us a quick background in terms of like pen testing, offensive security, and then let's hear how you got into social.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. It's a very kind introduction. As he said, my name is David Boyd. I've been involved indirectly or directly in cybersecurity for 15, almost 20 years now. Loved every aspect of it. And social engineering just ended up having to be something that I had a kind of a natural knack for. You had mentioned what kind of got you started in that, and as are many of our fellow hackers and information security engineers, I had a little bit of a mischievous past. So things like getting into movie theaters, for instance, back in the day, you had paper ticket stubs. You could find, paper ticket stubs out in the trash, out in the lobby or whatever. And I would grab some of those and, go up to the thing and, hey, I was just running out to my car to get a drink or, do something or whatever. And I just flash, one of the old tickets. Oh yeah, you're good. Go on in. So different things like that. Nothing terribly malicious, right?
Mhm.
Just getting into places and talking my way in and out of places that probably shouldn't have been able to or shouldn't belong. And I realized that that the human vulnerability is fun and easy to take advantage of for a lot of different reasons that we'll discuss on this call.
Yeah, definitely. And so getting into voice-based social engineering, that's like it's a very particular discipline, right? I mean, it's like to stand up a phishing campaign, I mean, that can take, several days of like infrastructure and building out an email and et cetera, et cetera. Voice-based, you got to do things like OSINT, and then, hopefully you come across phone numbers and then you start making phone calls. And it sounds so easy, like just rolls off the tongue. Be like, yeah, just call a user and get them to run some commands and Bob's your uncle, you get a shot, right? So but there's more to it than that. And so let's dive into the various steps. And by the way, I forgot to mention, this is really just like an interview style webinar. So we don't necessarily have slides. We're going to be talking about voice-based social engineering from the perspective of the attacker. And now we're going to be getting into like how to develop a pretext, some of the technology that we use, but we're also going to get into what's been the most effective defenses that David has seen. By the way, Dave is one of those guys where it's like, okay, like everybody on the red team, we can make phone calls. I've made lots and lots of phone calls, social engineering, that kind of thing. But if we really, really need to get in, this is the guy that we talk to. And so you can hear just kind of that nice, pleasant Southern charm that he's got. Like, when he starts talking, he's like, oh, it's like just like really nice guy. Like I want to get to know this guy. Right. Well, yeah. Behind that, let's just hope that that you don't get him on the phone if you're one of our clients during a red team. So let's talk about a pretext. So when we get into pretexting, the point of making a call on a red team is going to be something like, okay, I need a user to run a command, or I need them to download and execute something, or I just need a piece of information, maybe like a password. Okay. But before we do that, we have to have a workable idea, right? Like,
Mhm.
so when it comes to a pretext, assume that you are going after a company. We'll just call the company Acme Org.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're going after Acme and you want to get a user to, I don't know, either divulge a password or run a command or something like that. What are some of the steps that you go through before you even pick up the phone? Like, how do you develop a pretext? What's your methodology? What are the pieces of information you like to record? And how do you kind of do that like initial wind up before you ever pick up the phone?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, um, if we're talking about a company like Acme, right? If you think about like the old Warner Brothers, Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, those kind of things,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
say those are their clients, okay? Wile E. Coyote and things like that. You want to learn about the company, and the best way to learn about the company right now is something like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. So all of your typical social media sites, right? As well as going to something like acme.com, going to the company website, right? Figuring out, usually have the founders or the C-suite team, the owners, things like that on the website itself, and then you can then go to their LinkedIn pages, their Facebooks, things like that, kind of figure out how they think, how they got the company started, different things like that. And the whole goal of all this is to put yourself in the shoes as if you worked for that company, right? If we're talking about a pretext that is targeting users, now you have a different set of pretexts that's targeting like the help desk and things like that. But for this example specifically, if we're talking about targeting users, oftentimes I will go in as if I were a member of HR or a member of IT. IT is usually the more effective of the two. So I'll get on
Why is
LinkedIn.
that? Just real quick. Why would you prefer IT over HR?
So I prefer IT over HR because a lot of what we're trying to do with voice-based phishing is, like you said, access data, right? Whether it's get a shell on a user's box or do what we call a full account takeover. And that's where we not only get the user's password reset, we'll also take over their MFA and have it re-registered to our phone, our devices, things like that. And that's more applicable if you are calling the help desk as a user or if you are calling the user as a help desk, right? That makes a little more sense to them from a realistic perspective of like, oh yeah, I know Josh in IT. I've seen his emails come through several times, right? So this seems legit. So you'll do your research, you'll do your open source intelligence gathering on social media, you'll get on LinkedIn, Facebook, things like that. You'll figure out how the company operates. You want to try to also figure out some, what do they do if they're in sales? What are some of their big name clients? Because oftentimes in the contact us field or in the reviews field, like, oh, here's some reviews. You'll see company names that they've done business with. So you can be like, oh, they just won a big contract with Warner Brothers, right? So let me play on that and be like, oh yeah, by the way, this is related to the Warner Brothers contract we just won or something. So that's your in there. But if you're calling users and specifically trying to gain an account takeover for a user, when it comes to picking your targets, you want to try to make it seem as realistic and down to earth as possible, meaning you're not immediately going to go for the CEO. You would never want to go straight to the top because that's going to be a little sus, a little suspicious. But you also want to get enough of a foothold that you can actually do something with it. So I'll usually pick targets that are either new to the company, that have been, assigned or hired in or brought in, within the last 6 months to a year or so, that have jobs where they don't have a lot of people they work with. So something like facilities is a great one because there's usually only one or two facilities guys. There's not going to be 50 different facilities guys, right? He's going to have his own person that he reports to, things like that. Or softer, more common targets, things like sales guys are great for that, especially because a sales guy by nature wants to make a sale. He wants to be helpful. Good companies bring in good sales folks that want to be helpful and make that sale, and you can prey on that and take advantage of that to try and talk them into whatever it is. Uh, Additionally, different things like um, project management team or folks in non-technical roles. If you're calling a law firm, for instance, you may not call one of the partners, you may call one of the junior attorneys or an assistant, or somebody that answers the phones there at the front desk, like a front desk person, something like that. Not super super highly technical or technically involved, but still wants to be helpful and doesn't want to be a burden, right?
Oh man, law firms are the best because typically on the page the pages of law firms on their website, they'll have like a full lawyer index, like an index of all their attorneys and their
All
cell
their
phone
phone
numbers,
numbers.
which is just it's just a playground, right?
Right.
So okay, so let's go with we got Acme, we have the target organization,
Hmm.
okay. We decided we're going to be impersonating help desk. Okay, so you've gone out to LinkedIn, you find a help desk person. We'll call the help desk person Joe. So you got Joe. He's a service desk engineer number 2. So he's got some tenure, he's got some authority. You started hinting around about target selection and about like maybe the person's in HR, maybe the person is in sales. So let's talk about 2 different kinds of target selection. And by the way, I'm glad that we're doing IT and IT impersonation because that's like scattered spider.
Yeah.
That they do a lot of that stuff. And in fact, I think that's how the Caesars takeover happened. Is they called up Caesars and impersonated the help desk. And so, okay, so we have a bit of our pretext. So we're starting to develop a profile in the company.
Hmm.
We got some people on LinkedIn. what are some of the ways? Let's talk about two different scenarios. The first scenario is you can pick your target. Okay,
Yes.
it's like you go on LinkedIn, you find someone, talk about target selection there, and then talk about, say, a restricted target selection. What I mean by that is, let's say that you did a password spraying attack, you got 3 sets of credentials, but they all require MFA. Okay,
Hmm.
so you can't really choose your target. You have, I mean, you can't, like, of the three, right? So, but you have to decide, which one that you're going to go to, how you're going to, manifest that sort of campaign and that attack to those different people. So, how would you choose a person if you could just pick anyone? All
Hmm.
right. What are some of the, and by the way, we're going to get into some controversial territory here, because like anytime you have to pick someone like another human, every red teamer has like some criteria they're going to go through, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to talk about that, because that's those are important details, right? So talk about some of the criteria you use, and then if you can, like, target restriction, how does that change your game?
Okay.
Does my question make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So for the first one, for target selection, right? Um, if we're under contract with a client and they say you can use whoever you want, go for it, just pass it through us first, which is usually how that goes, right? They say go do your own sins, pass us a list, we'll knock people off the list that we don't want you to target for one reason or another, or it's free reign, go forth and conquer, God be with you. Um, I will I will typically choose targets based on what I feel is, and I've got to word this to be sensitive, is more, they're going to be more pliable and more able to be manipulated, more able to be taken advantage of, right? So what I mean by that is there are several factors that may come into play, things like age, right?
Mhm.
Um, if they're typically older, and by older I mean over the age of 50, and they're still working, those can oftentimes be softer targets, right? And I say softer sensitively, right? We're not saying that age makes you a softer target. In our experience, that's typically how it goes. Um, New to the company, right? That's where I said about the 6 months or below.
Mhm.
If we get lucky enough, we can find somebody that just got hired. They're still trying to earn their stripes. They're still trying to make a good impression. Bonus time might be coming up, right? So
Could be really helpful.
they don't want to screw anything up. They want to
Yeah.
just keep doing a good job. And you call in and you say, I'm with IT. We have this problem. They're thinking, oh my gosh, I just got this job. I don't want to lose this. I want to help you however I can. Um, um, Women, for instance,
Mhm.
will make for good targets, right? In our experience, women are a little more helpful than men are. So I will use
Generally nicer than men. They're just
generally
nicer.
nicer than men.
La-
And they're
la-
generally nicer
ladies,
to talk to.
ladies, you're just nicer. Okay,
Yeah,
that's just the way it is. So
it's just the way it is. It's
take
easier.
as a badge of honor.
It's easier for women to be sympathetic, and that
Yeah,
is just how you're made.
yeah,
That's how the good
yeah.
Lord made you. So it's easier for women to be sympathetic. So if you use that as a part of your pretext, or there's some plight or something, and that goes for help desk as well as users, then those are typically better targets. And if I had a list of priority, I will typically choose to target the women first before I start trying to work on men, just because that's just how it goes. It's easier to sympathize and form some sort of trust there and connection.
Sure.
Which, side note, by the way, inherently what social engineering is taking advantage of the inherent trust that most
Yeah.
humans have for other humans, right?
Yep.
It's a strange new world that we're living in, but at the end of the day, humans are inherently trusting. If you pick up the phone and you talk to somebody and you keep your tone good and your inflection good and you're just talking to somebody on the level, for the most part, most people are going to be trusting and they're going to want to be helpful, even if you've caught them at a time and they're annoyed or they're having a bad day or whatever.
Sure.
Either they want to be helpful or they just want to get you off the darn phone, so they'll just do whatever it is so they can carry on with their day, right? um so I'll also look into that as well. If I find some good targets, I'll dive a little bit deeper, try to see if I have an anonymous Facebook account just for this, try to see if I can find them on Facebook and start following different things like family trees, who they're connected to, what their interests are, what their likes are, right? Try to see if I can kind of get into their mind a little bit. Oh, they've got 3 kids and they've got soccer on
Mhm.
Thursday and they live in this state and it's hot right now, or they're going through a drought, or there's a bunch of fires, or they just had a huge storm go through, right? That gives you more ammo for when you're talking to them to establish that connection. So when you get them on the phone, hey man, it's good to talk to you. By the way, did you guys get through the storms okay that happened last night? Right now, you have that inherent trust because somebody that didn't do that research wouldn't know that a big storm came through the night before, right? So now they're like, oh yeah,
You're
yeah, we were
establishing
good,
rapport.
or whatever. Yeah, you spend a few seconds establishing that rapport. So um, I'm talking around and around your question here, and I apologize.
It's
But
okay.
that's kind of my thought process, right? I'll get on there and these guys look good. Um, they don't work directly with my target on a day-to-day basis. If I'm acting like Joe from IT, if these guys
Yeah.
don't work with Joe from IT on a day-to-day basis, they're not going to know his voice, they're not going to know his tone and inflection as much, hopefully. They don't see him day to day. A lot of people are still work from home, they're still a remote-based workforce. So I'll try to also keep that into consideration as well. And then in terms of like tenure and things like that, I don't shy away from folks that have been with the company for 10 or 20 years either, too, because on the opposite end of that, if I'm choosing to be a person that works in IT, I might choose a level two guy or whatever. I won't go straight to the top and do like the top IT guy because that's going to get you caught. I might do like a newer IT guy as well. That's maybe even an intern and has only
Mhm.
been there a few months. And hey, I'm really sorry to bother you. My boss gave me this assignment. I've got to fix this thing. I really appreciate your help. You're really going to help me out on this. I know it's at the end of the day. We'll get through this together, and then we'll carry on with our, that kind of thing. You're working towards, I don't want to say pity, but you're working towards like, man, you raise them up so that you can accomplish your goals and they feel good at the end of the day, which, unfortunately you're being malicious, but
You hinted around about something that was really interesting, which is you want to avoid people that might work with the person that you're impersonating.
right.
And this is, I don't know if this has caught you, this has caught me,
Oh yeah.
and people on the red team specifically. There was a story, Hans on the red team was making, he was making a phone call to a user impersonating a guy from IT. I think like his name is Jake, and said, "Hi, this is Jake from IT." And the guy said, "I'm sorry, who is this?" "This is Jake from IT." And the guy was like, "You're not Jake."
You're not
And
Jake.
Hans was like, "No, I am. I have a cold." And the guy was like, "You're not Jake." And he hangs up. And so we actually did an on-site debrief with this company. And who walks in the room? Jake. And so we're going around doing introductions, and the guy gets, we come to Jake's turn. He's like, "Hi, my name is Jake." Like, it was super low voice. We're just like, shoot. Hi, Jake.
This the same thing happened to me actually just a few weeks ago. The target that I had chosen knew the guy I was impersonating, had worked
Oh,
with him at
man.
every other job. They were like the best of friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he started laughing. He goes, he goes, Jake, huh? And I was like, yeah, it's Jake. He's like, is that so? Well, did you get, a cold within the last 15 minutes or something, Jake?
Yeah.
Because I just talked to you.
Oh,
I
dang.
was like,
Man, this is bad luck, right?
yeah, just
Like there's so much of this is luck. You
yeah.
have
And
no
the
idea what's
part
going
of
to
it is
happen until you pick up the phone, right?
is you can do, and that's the other thing too. You can do all the research in the world. You can do all the OSINT gathering in the world that you can. You can call the call tree and call HR and spend hours and
Mhm.
hours. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is luck. And then at the end of the day, you won't know what's going to happen until you get that person on the phone.
All
Because
right.
you may know that you may not know that the person on the phone's having the worst day of their life, or you may not know that the person on the end of the phone's having the best day of their life.
Right. Right.
So
There's a couple of questions that come in. We're going to get to your questions live. I got a screen up right next to me. So if we don't answer it immediately, that's because it's gonna your question is gonna get better answered in a different spot here. So, all right, let's quick talk about technology of choice. So, when it comes to finding numbers, because finding numbers is its own challenge,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And frequently, we'll take a quick detour into this topic, which is mobile numbers versus like a user's desk.
mhm,
And work from home changed a lot of this, right? So it used to be that users were all in the office, you could call a desk number, you could get an extension, you get transferred in. And it got harder when people are just at home now, and maybe they just got like a business cell phone,
mhm.
because there's been like a major shift there. And so some clients are pretty sensitive about that. They're like, nah, we don't want you calling users on their personal phone, which is kind of a
Right.
BYOD scenario. So in terms of um, that particular angle, do you have specific ways that you go about finding mobile numbers? What's your best resource for locating that? And what do you do if you can't find any?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, finding mobile numbers has gotten way harder than it used to be.
Yeah.
First thing I'll check is, obviously the company website. Next thing I'll do is I'll call the main company phone number and go through what's called the call tree. So I'll dial through the call tree. Oftentimes it'll tell you either the cell phone or the extension, and I'll start making notes about the extensions of my targets. Um, the next thing is old data dumps. So you can often find phone numbers on things like dehashed. Hunter.io will sometimes include phone numbers there, as well as email addresses. Um, any of the old data dumps, a lot of those have phone numbers. Uh, it's definitely harder. If you've got some time and you really want to work in and be really stealthy, you can oftentimes establish a pretext and email the user ahead of time, and they'll include their
Hmm.
cell phone in their signature. So when they email you back,
Yep.
boom, now you've got their cell phone. That's helpful too. Oftentimes you can call, sometimes HR or somebody and be like, "Hey, I'm looking for this guy. I'm trying to close this ticket or this sale or whatever." And oftentimes, HR or one of them are more than happy to just be like, "Oh yeah, here's his number. Go ahead and call him directly on this." Front desk ladies are great for that too. The secretaries and
Mm.
things, personal assistants, are great for that. If all of those are burned and I just cannot find a number, it's never a bad thing,
Mhm.
to just go to your client and be like, listen, we've looked everywhere, including under the kitchen sink, and we just can't find a number for
Yep.
this guy.
Sure.
We've tried social engineering other users for the number, things like that. And it's not a cheat to do that, because like you said, it's a different world, and a lot of folks are work from home, a lot of folks have BYODs, and they don't publish that information. They don't want their personal cell phone number out there because they don't want spam calls and things like that. So it's not a cheat to ask your client, like, "Hey, let me get a list of numbers." Because at the end of the day, you're not testing whether or not you can find a phone number. What you're testing is the end user, right? You're testing the end
Yeah.
user and all the detections and things that they have in place. So,
Yeah. Okay. Question that came up as so in terms of like pretexting, how would you say the pretext changes? This is going after the service desk directly, as opposed to targeting users pretending to be someone from from the service desk. I really like this question because now we'll change the pretext just a little bit.
mhm.
How would you social engineer the help desk directly?
So help desks are great, and we love targeting them. Oftentimes, a client will ask for one of the two. They'll say, "Will you target users, or will you target the help desk?" Or
Mm.
in some cases, they want half and half. I want you to target these 20 users, and I want you to call the help desk 20 times and try to hit, all of our help desk agents, right? So when we target help desks, those are great for what I call account takeovers. So again, do my OSINT, figure out a pretext, find a user. Obviously, not somebody super, super high up unless it's specifically requested for. Maybe somebody newish to the company or even has been there for a while, somebody not in a super technical field, something that would make sense if you call the help desk and say, "I can't get into my account," right? So I'll
Yeah.
call the help desk. I'm posing as this user. I'll either spoof a number if I have it, if I can, or I'll just star 67 and block my number altogether.
Mm.
And I'll tell them, "Hey, I am Joe Smith, with Acme, and the pretext we like to use is I can't get into my external webmail, right? So most companies are on either Google services or Microsoft 365 services, usually one of the two. Some good OSINT will usually kind of tell you which one they're on. You could say, "Yeah, I'm on, Microsoft365.com, whatever. I'm trying to log in. It's not working. Can we do a password reset? Can you talk me through what I'm doing wrong?" And they go, "Oh, okay, cool." Usually what they'll ask is, "Are you on a company device, your personal device?" And then depending on your pretext, you'd be like, "Yeah, I'm working from home today. I'm on my personal device. I don't have access to my bookmarks like I normally do. So what's the website I should be going to? Let's check that first." And they'll usually tell you whatever it is, if it's some internal website or something. And then you go, "Okay, I'm logging in. I believe my email's this." You talk them through what you're doing while you're doing it live as
Hmm.
if you were the user. So you're
Hmm.
literally trying to log into Microsoft services while you're on the phone with the help desk. And then you say, "Okay, I'm gonna type my password in, it's not working. Hang on. No, it's still not working. Let me just check one thing. I think I had some stuff written down over here. Shuffle some papers. All right, I think it's this. Oh, no, I still can't log in. Do you see anything wrong with my account? Is there, did I get locked out? Have I had too many attempts or whatever?" Um, at this point, what you're looking for when you're targeting the help desk is verification questions. You want your help desk to ask very specific, only known to the users verification questions to verify the identity of the person calling them, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times they'll do something like, when were you hired? Who's your supervisor's name? These are not great because you can get that information from LinkedIn. Obviously, you can see when they were hired, their date of hire. Usually, you can follow along their connections and things and kind of figure out somebody in their department. You can just start throwing out names. What I have found works well is something like the last four of your social security number, which should not be publicly accessible, should not be publicly known. That should only be known to you. And then harder to answer questions like, what's your employee ID? Again, that's not going to be publicly accessible, publicly known. That's two pieces that the user knows or should know. And then at that point, if they cannot answer those questions correctly, you end the call. That's it. That's the end. I'm so sorry. You'll have to call back when you can verify appropriately, or I can call you back on your direct internal line if you would like, right?
Yeah,
Um, so the
I like
password
that.
reset, the password reset is a great pretext, and it's been the most popular one and the one that we've had the most success with. That leads into, usually if there's MFA, that leads into MFA. So then you have to play the game. It's a two-part game. Can I talk them into and get them to trust me enough to reset the user's password? And can I also get them to either give me a one-time use code or register a new device? And that's where you have to establish a new pretext of like, well, my kid knocked my phone in the bath last night, or it's scorching hot outside. I left it in the car while I was in the gym and it fried my phone. So I'm waiting on a new phone to come. Whatever it might be, you want to
Hmm.
make it as realistic as possible, but you also want to convince them, hey, that old thing isn't working. I'm not getting the one-time code. I'm not getting the MFA push. Can you help me out? This is, important. This is urgent. This is whatever. I've got to get this done. I'll come into the office tomorrow and fix it. I just need it done right now.
Man, you hint around with so many things that about
Sorry, I
on the
done a lot.
call. And I want to talk about those things like principles of commitment and sense of urgency and stuff like that. So we'll get into the call itself.
Okay.
Before we actually get into the call, though, let's talk about technology. So you mentioned caller ID spoofing. What do you use to spoof caller ID, and do you get into other technology like Teams or Zoom or any other means of connecting with the user?
So in my experience, I have found the simpler you keep it, the easier it's going to be for you. When you are trying to balance too many things at one time, you're going to overwhelm yourself and it's going to come out on the call.
Hmm.
Um, so, a popular one that people use for spoofing calls is something like Spoof Card.
Hmm.
We also like using Zoiper with VoIP MS or any sort
Yep.
of,
Yep.
online voice over IP service. Any of them are fine. Um, you can go in there and set your number to whatever you want and then connect it through something like Zoiper. And then when you call, it will come up as that number.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, the numbers that I will choose are the main headquarters of whatever company I have, right?
The,
Because
the the spoofing number, you mean?
the spoofing number, yeah, the number I'm
Yeah.
spoofing,
Hmm.
I'll spoof usually the headquarters of the company I'm calling. If I have the user's number, I will try to spoof that. Sometimes that call gets dropped because there are some protections in place for cell carriers and things. So I will usually just kind of fall back on, oh, this is the number of headquarters. It's coming up on my phone as Acme Corp.
Hmm.
Obviously, the caller's calling from Acme Corp, right? Most
Right.
people are keen to see that.
Okay. Good. Yeah. And so, okay. So let's recap a bit where we are so far. So we've chosen some targets. We are impersonating the help desk. We have our target company. We have a write-up in place. So we have some information about the company and hopefully, if we're lucky, information about the humans that we're going to be contacting. So maybe where they live or a job title or job responsibility, things like that. And by the way, for those of you listening, it's not uncommon. So when we do social engineering calls at Trusted Sec, it's not uncommon. So I've done calls for people on my team, and so like I remember Melvin did this. He would give me a target, but he would give me an extensive write up. He's like, okay,
Oh yeah.
you're gonna spoof this number. You're gonna pretend to be this person. Here's the pretext that you're going to use, and like did all this pre work, and it makes it so easy
Oh
because you're just at that point you just like assume an identity
yeah. Hmm.
and you get on the phone with them. You're like, hi, I'm Jake from IT and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you're telling the user things that they're expecting to hear. And
Mm-hmm.
so, once that happens, I mean, I'm not going to say it's game over, but you've established so much trust with the person because you have so much insider knowledge. They're very, very willing to trust you. And I think that you hinted around about that as far as the exploitation of trust is the fundamental principle of social engineering. Why we social engineer is because we want to abuse the trust that humans innately have for each other. And so it's dangerous. And I always tell my clients the same thing. I'm like, listen, I know that we're doing this, but I do not want to leave you in like this hyper cynical state where you don't trust anyone, because that's just an awful way to live, right? We want to think that if we get a flat tire and pull over and somebody pulls up next to us, that person has our best interest in mind.
Mm-hmm.
We want to assume that, right? And so exploiting trust can be a dangerous thing, but it's what the bad guys do. So it's one of the reasons why we do that. Okay, so we talked about technology. You mentioned Zoiper, great tool. Now let's actually talk about the process of making the call. All right, so you got your tech lined up, you got the user's number. You use a piece of tech like Zoiper to spoof the internal company number, or like a number that's going to show up as Acme on their caller ID. You
Yes.
make a phone call, and the user answers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, actually, we'll save that. The user doesn't answer. It goes straight to voicemail. Do you leave a message? Do you leave a callback number, or what do you typically do in that scenario?
So in that scenario, I will usually just end the call.
Just end it. Okay.
It's better. I just end the call. Don't leave any message or anything like that. Move on to the next call, right?
Okay.
And because the more you open yourself up to things like that, the more suspicious it's going to be, right? If you try to do a callback and your number's different than the one you called from, and you're like, hey, call me back at this number, it's going to seem a little weird, especially if the area code or something is different from where they're based out of, right?
Sure.
They may call, or they may know the real user and call them instead, or the real IT guy and call them instead and be like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, did you just call me? Well, now
Yep.
you have an incident that's going to start up, and they're going to
Now
have to
you're
do
going.
incident response, and they're going to have to start investigations and stuff. So I don't like to open myself up to that. If the user
Okay.
doesn't answer, I usually just end the call, call it done. I'll call back later. At most, it will show up as a missed call on their device
Right.
from Acme Corp. So they'll
Yep.
just be like, you can think of a million reasons why Acme Corp would be calling you, and it's better for them to have an air of mystery than for you to leave a voicemail and be like, "This is Bob from Acme Corp IT," and then instead of you being able to use them as a pretext again, they've already called the real Bob from Acme IT, and Bob goes, "I never called you," so
Mm-hmm.
now you've burned your pretext before you even got a chance to use it. So,
Gotcha. Okay. So here's the scenario. We're getting ready to make our call. You got your target chosen. This particular target happens to be a user whose username and password you already have. Let's say you did
Mhm.
password spring attack on the perimeter. You got their username, you got their password. You want to log in via VPN. You need their VPN PIN code, the 6-digit
Mhm.
code. That's their MFA code. So you make the call. You are impersonating Acme. User
Mhm.
picks up. What's an opening line? How do you put the user at ease?
So, if I am posing as IT and I'm trying to put the user at ease, sometimes if, and I'm repeating myself here, sorry. If I'm posing as IT, what I will sometimes do is call IT if I have the IT help desk and listen how they answer their calls.
Oh,
Hey, this is
sure.
Bob from the Acme IT desk, right? I may not say anything. I may just end the call. But
Mm-hmm.
now I've got their opening line so that I can repeat that to the client, right? And I know that's how they do it. So, hey, this is Bob from Acme IT. How you doing? Is this Sarah? Or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hey, yeah, it's Sarah. Hey, Sarah, did I catch you at a bad time? No, no, you're good. What's going on? Hey, listen, such and such and such, right? So for like a 6-digit pin, for instance, I might be like, hey, yeah, sorry to bug you. I'll typically choose call times that I can use in the pretext. So right before lunch, everyone's thinking about eating what they want to go for lunch, what they want to eat for lunch, whatever, if they have errands to do. And then towards the end of the day, people are thinking about, I've got to pick up my kids,
Leaving.
got
Mm-hmm.
sports things, got end of day stuff. They're not
Mm-hmm.
hyper focused on their work at hand. They're trying to get on with their day.
Right.
Um, so I typically choose, those as opportune call times, and I work that into the pretext. Hey, I know we're getting, towards the end of the day. It's 4 o'clock. Obviously you want to use their time zone. It's 4 o'clock or whatever. We had an issue, and we've been having an issue all day with users not being able to sync their MFA with our internal server. For some reason, their PIN codes are usually one off, or they're not rotating correctly, or whatever, whatever line I want to feed her. We need to resync everyone's MFA token or MFA prompt on their phone with our internal service. So if you're okay with it, and if you're not in the middle of anything right now, this isn't going to mess up your work. You don't need to reboot your computer or anything. All I'm going to do is I'm going to set up our internal server, and you got to talk a little bit of techno jargon. I'm going to set up our internal server so that it can catch the new MFA code. All I need you to do is read that back to me real quick on the next rotation. So whenever you're ready, and then if you've established enough of a trust and you've spent, a minute or two developing that inherent trust with them, usually they're going to be okay. It's the end of the day. They're not thinking about it. They'll be like, okay, yeah, hang on. It's getting ready to rotate here in a minute. Okay, whenever you're ready now. All right. 626131. All right, so I'm typing it in 626131. You've already got the password, you've already got the pin, whatever, hit enter. And then you say, okay, it says it's syncing. We're waiting. And
Hmm.
really what you're doing is you're logging in. You're logging
Yep. Yep.
into the VPN and you go, okay, yep, it's resynced. It says that you're good to go. You shouldn't have any more issues with it. So appreciate your time today. If you have any questions or, feel free to call us back over here at IT. We'd love to help you out. Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks for helping me out. Cool. You have a great rest of your day. It's
Beautiful.
really that easy. That sounds dumb and that sounds Hollywood, but it's truly that easy
Yeah.
because you establish enough, I hate to call it techno babble, you establish enough techno babble mixed in with it's the end of the day, mixed in with the inherent trust, mixed in with, all of that.
Hmm.
And most people, again, I just want to help and they just want to get on with their day. They don't want there to be any issues, they're just trying to get their work done. So you're taking advantage of all of that to put it together and go, all we're doing is resyncing your phone to make sure you don't have any issues. I don't like
Yeah.
having issues. Cool. I trust you.
Yeah. One of
But
my
really,
one of
you're
my favorite
logging into
lines
the
on that particular campaign, by the way, the success rate of that campaign is like near 100%. It
It's
almost
near 100%.
always works.
And
What?
listen, that's not us bragging at
No,
Trust.
no.
That is a fact. That is near
Yeah.
100.
Yeah, absolutely. What one of my favorite lines to drop to the user is, I would never ask for your password. Don't tell me your password.
Don't tell me your password.
Right? So like you confirm what they already know about
Yep.
security. And so then they're like, oh, okay, you're not going to then it's okay, because people don't put an MFA code in the same mental bucket of severity as they do their password.
To do their
Right.
password. And
And
if you
so, and
add
that,
that, and if you add that line about this isn't going to disrupt your work, we're not desyncing you from anything like that. We're just making sure that there's not going to be any issues in the future.
yeah,
That also makes, oh, phew, okay, good. I don't have to reboot in the middle of this Excel spreadsheet I'm writing.
yeah, yeah. I there's a few different topics that you went into when you were talking the our pretend user through doing what you want them to do on the phone. And I want to get a little bit into the psychology of what tricks do you employ when walking a user through steps on a phone. So for example, getting a user across the commitment threshold.
Hmm.
Users are once you can get a user to commit once, they're likely to commit, something else. And this is true for just anybody, like the standard adage is, a social engineer on the phone is never going to come out and ask you for what they want right away. They're going to
Right.
ask you two or three warm-up questions that are easy. And if you answer those, you've crossed the commitment threshold, right?
Mhm.
So how do you work in like something like the commitment threshold or principles of urgency,
Mhm.
or things like that, to try and manipulate a user, especially if you get someone on the phone and you're like, they don't sound very helpful, right? Because the way somebody answers a phone, that tells you an awful lot. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
you can tell people are smiling if they answer the phone just by how they talk, right? So if you start picking up on hesitation in the user's voice, what are some things that you do to try and put them at ease?
So, one thing, and I will answer that. One thing, to think about when it comes to the psychology of social engineering is that there are a number of different biases involved with any sort of social engineering. There's authority bias, confirmation,
Sure,
reciprocity, scarcity, liking. You could write a book about all this, and several have been written.
sure.
And really, what it is you're either taking advantage of or pairing with any of these different biases that people will have. So for instance, like an authority bias, people are more likely to comply with requests from folks that they perceive as authority figures, right? If you're the calling as the IT
Mhm.
guy, then they're more likely to be like, well, he's the expert, I'm not. He's going to know better than I will. When you call a user and you start to feel that hesitation or you start to feel like, I don't know. when there's doubt injected, or you start to feel like
Hmm.
there's doubt, that's when you have to be quick on the draw to acknowledge that doubt, right? You don't want to ignore it. You don't want to, hey, listen, I know
Hmm.
this seems like a little bit of this is an example I'll use, right? I'll say, I know this seems like a little bit of an unusual request. I know we just had some security awareness training, a few weeks ago or whatever.
Right.
You're doing a great job, by the way. From what I've seen, you've actually never failed any of our social engineering testing, so I want to applaud you on that. You do that. It sounds awful and it's terrible, but
It is awful, and you're awful.
and you tell them
Oh
that, you
my
go,
God.
listen, this seems unusual. And normally we wouldn't need to do something like this, but honestly, our systems have been giving me a headache,
Yeah.
all day. We've
Sympathy.
been indentured with calls. So
Mm,
that's when you start to get something like um, reciprocity bias, right? Then you get, I'm doing this as a favor to save you
right. Right.
headache. You're returning the favor to save me headaches, so I'm not dealing with trouble tickets until midnight tonight. I
Hmm.
just want to go home. You're really doing me a solid favor by doing this. You kind of play into that. I hate to say sympathy a little bit, but you kind of play
Yeah.
into that sympathy a
Yeah.
little bit. To try to get, again, it's like, oh well, yeah, I mean, it is the end of the day, and dude sounds a little stressed, so like,
Hmm.
what's the harm in reading off this 6-digit code to a stranger on the phone?
Right. Right. I've used the sympathy style pretext a lot
Yeah.
with great success. And that's all you're doing is you want them to feel a little sorry for you,
A little bit,
and
yeah, sympathize with.
manipulation tactic.
We're all working hard, we're all one team. It's been a long day, this trouble ticket thing has been hard. Yeah.
Okay. So the user decides that they're going to help you, um, and they read off. Let's say they read off a code, and you type it in, and something goes wrong. You don't get into VPN. What do you do at the point when you run into a technical difficulty on your end? Either VPN doesn't work,
Mhm.
or the shell that the code that you wanted them to run runs, but you don't get a shell. What do you do in that moment? And do you leave yourself a quote unquote backdoor with a user?
Mhm.
Hopefully you understand my question.
Yeah, no, I got you. I got you. So it depends on the call, and I treat it on a call by call basis. So I don't do this 100% of the time, but I don't always do this, right? So if I'm feeling like the conversation has gone well, I've connected with the user, we're vibing, we're talking about kids, whatever. Um, then if I go to type it in and it's not working, and I'm like, oh crap, I broke something, or
Mhm.
there's like geolocation involved, and you can only log in from a certain location, something, anything, right?
Yeah.
I'll be like, okay, let me get the next code. Let me just do this one more time just to make sure it's synced right. I'll have her, her or him try to read me one more code. If
Mhm.
it doesn't work at that point, I will lie and be like, yep, looks like you're all synced. You're good to go. Everything's good on our end. Appreciate your help
Sure.
today. Have a good day. End the call. I
Okay.
don't want to push too hard for fear of losing that inherent trust I've already built. Now, if it's really good, if we're just laughing and cutting up and we've become best buddies, then I might
Hmm.
be like, hey, if it's okay, I might call you back tomorrow to make sure everything's working
Yep.
right. And
Yep.
then that leaves that back door, right? You've already established the inherent trust. This is Sam with the IT help desk. When's a good time tomorrow to call back just to follow up and make sure everything's good, right? And then you record the
Yeah.
time or whatever. And then you call them back, try to, you spend the night fixing your infrastructure, fixing your C2, whatever it is. Leave yourself that in of like, hey, yeah. And then when you call them back, you've got to be confident enough to be like, listen, last night it says it synced, but it didn't look like it synced this morning. Let's try this one more time, a little different way. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then you're doing the same thing, but you're having them think it's a different way. Um, for instance, you might move your payload after you've adjusted it. You might change the URL where you're hosting your payload by just one word or something.
Hmm.
And you've made adjustments to your payload to make sure that you are trying to get around whatever EDR it is. And then you try again, right? And then if
Sure.
that doesn't work, usually that's when I'll cut it for that user. I'll
Yeah.
move on to a different user because at that point now, not only have you returned to the scene of the crime, you've opened that door again of suspicion, and you want to keep that door as closed as tightly as possible
Yeah.
and not push so hard that it suddenly becomes suspicious, right? So
Right.
two, I hate to say the rule of two. The rule of two is my personal rule. If I can't get it in one or two calls, that's it. I'm done. Move on to the next
Move
user.
on. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Um, good question from Ryan. How do you achieve MFA push notification social engineering? So when it comes to push notification, so think like Duo,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? If somebody logs in, they get a push. What's your process for that?
Yeah, so obviously, unless you have physical control over the user's device, that's going to be much harder to take advantage of. And that's
Hmm.
where I will use a pretext of something like my kid knocked my phone in the toilet or the bathtub last night while I was washing him. I left my phone in the car and it overheated and blew up. Something about a lost device, or I don't have access to that device. I ran over it in the car, whatever it is. I have lost access to my device and I'm waiting for a new device to come in. Can you either issue me a one-time pass? A lot of MFA vendors will do one-time codes or temporary one-time codes, or if you're lucky, you could even talk them into temporarily lowering MFA just
Hmm.
for that user for something like 24 hours. You could be like, yeah, phone will be here tomorrow. If you could just turn off MFA just for the day, I'll come in the office, re-register the new device, get MFA back, put back on there. I'll call you guys, make sure everything's set up, right? A lot of the times the help desk is like, well, I don't want to mess with another trouble ticket and I don't want this guy to be locked out of his work. So we've established that he's a trustworthy fella. Let me go ahead and turn that off. Or do
Yeah, and Ryan clarified this. He was referring more to the end user gets push notification. So I'm thinking like push fatigue or
oh, push
notification.
fatigue.
Yeah, something like that. So maybe go into that for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So push fatigue is another great way. If I have a working password and I can send a push notification to a phone, that's
Hmm.
the word for it, is sometimes we'll do push fatigue, right? Where we'll just constantly just hammer, log in, log in,
Hmm.
log in, and just have those boom, 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 hit their phone. And oftentimes people will see it. And if it's around the time that somebody would normally log in, you have to time this just right, right? So usually in the morning, 8 or 9 a.m., whatever their current time is, or whenever they do it, or after lunch, whenever they're coming back from lunch or something, if you time it just right, they're already logging in and they may see it and they're like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Is it coming back? And they're just
Yep.
clicking, and the whole time you're just watching and waiting for it to hook, and then you're in. Does that
Gotcha.
does that
Gotcha.
did that answer that? I hope that answered
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. Push fatigue is and it works. It
It
still works.
works. You have to
Um.
time it just right though.
Yeah.
If it's in the middle
Yep.
of the day and they've been logged in for 2 hours, you're gonna get caught if you're not careful. So
Definitely. And my favorite time to send push fatigue is like 9 o'clock at night.
yep.
When like the user's on their phone, they get ready for bed, they're like, I just don't want to deal with this, and they just hit accept, and then you're in. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, so I talked to someone who is not in the industry at all, and I was like, hey, if you could ask a social engineer anything, like pertaining to phone calls and stuff like that, what would be the question, assuming that money is not the answer? Because I think the vast majority of us deal with like spam calls. I mean, the whole point of those is just to get money in some way, shape, or form, right? So assuming that we're talking about a social engineer is trying to get into your company, what would you ask? And it was an interesting question. What does a no voice sound like, where you aren't going to get anywhere or you might get reported? How does that handle? How do you handle someone that has like they're stern, they have a no voice?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oftentimes, if I can't take the time to either sympathize, establish authority, establish rapport, whatever it is, if they're just straight no the whole time, just nope, not going to do it. I
Hmm.
don't trust you, screw off, whatever. It's a
Yeah,
loss. It's a loss. You can't,
yeah,
the harder you try to push, just like with sales, right? Social engineering at its heart is sometimes or can sometimes be compared to sales. At the end of the day, the harder you push on a no, the harder that no is going to come back, and you're eventually the jig's going to be up, right? So if you start getting aggressive, or you start losing your cool, or you start getting frustrated, whatever, um, they're going to keep telling you no, and then they may end up calling the real help desk, or they may end up calling the real person, or they may raise a red flag somewhere, right? So you
yeah,
have to balance that want and need for a shell with the ability to go, the jig is up on this one, I have to just call it, right? And
yeah.
you can hang your head in defeat. for that user, but there's usually more, right? You don't want to beat yourself up too
Yeah.
much. But what does a no sound like? It's a good question. There's tone and inflection
Mhm.
within the user that you're talking to, and this is male and female too. Um, long stretched out words or long stretched out inflections is usually a good indication that there's doubt. So they'll be like, well, when they
Mhm. Mhm.
draw words out and things, that's when you got to start kind of, let's start thinking about a back door or a way out.
Yep.
Because they're starting to get suspicious, right? And
Yep.
you can try to deflect or reflect away from that suspicion. But at the end of the day, the harder you push, just like with sales, um, for most folks, the worse it's going to be. Everyone does some form of social engineering in their life. That's another point I want to bring up. If you are interviewing for a job, you are
Mhm.
social engineering in some way. If you're in sales, you're social engineering in some way. If you're negotiating a raise or trying to buy a car or, trying to haggle the price down on something or whatever, there are different forms of social engineering that go into that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's that
No,
same concept, that same thought
yeah,
process.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And you also hinted around about something else. And by the way, I see the questions coming in. We might go over just a little bit in time because there's still a lot of things left to get to. So
Talk too
understand
much. I'm
people want to
sorry.
drop. Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. But once again, as Rosa mentioned, this will be put out on YouTube once we're done with that. So okay, where was okay? So you mentioned once during the call where you might have to lie your way out of something.
Mhm.
You're a good person. How do you deal with the morality aspect of this, from a professional standpoint? I've been asked this question a lot. I think everybody who when we describe what we do, like everybody asks the question, how do you sleep at night? Right. So like how do you square doing something like this with trying to be a good human being?
So in 1936, Dale Carnegie wrote a book entitled How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's a fantastic book, by the way. If you've never read it, I highly recommend anybody in any industry at any point in their life, they need to read that book. The lessons in that book are relevant in 1936 as well as they are relevant here in 2025, right? In that book, he discusses how human connection is at the heart of how to win friends and influence people, right?
Mhm.
And we're sort of taking advantage of that to a degree when we're doing social engineering. And because of that, because we're trying to build trust and then we're taking advantage of the trust, there is that question of morality, right? You're you're a mean, horrible person because you got the person to trust you and you lied to them, you lied through your teeth or whatever. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily a moral question. Just like
Mhm.
when you are on a red team and you're able to pop into a Citrix instance or pop a SQL server, something like that. It's not a question of morality. It is a question of, are you training your end users? Do you have specific controls in place? Do you have the defenses put up to protect the people and the information that is inherently vulnerable that helps make the company run or helps keep the company running or helps keep people stay employed, makes
Mhm.
the company money, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you're helping to train to protect that and build
Yeah.
up those defenses even better. So when I lie to Linda in HR and I get her to run my payload, it's not it's not me being immoral. I'm not being cruel or mean. I'm
Sure.
not picking on her. Ultimately, it's not even necessarily her that we're testing. It's the overall security posture of the company, the overall training and security awareness training and things that are going on. Um, that we're checking, right? We want to make sure, okay, if the human element fails, where did the breakdown happen? Was it in training? Do the users feel comfortable enough to say no? Have you been able to train your users in the proper responses for these phone calls, for these emails, for whatever it
Mhm.
is? Have you given them the confidence and the ability to, again, to say no? Nobody likes to be told no, right? No is a very
Right.
negative thing. But at the end of the day, the word no is an extremely powerful defensive measure.
Yeah.
And in terms of the question of morality for that, it's are we doing everything we can, we being IT in general, are we doing everything we can to empower our users to use that defensive measure of the word no, or
Yeah.
I won't do that. I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable. I'm going to go talk to IT or my supervisor, whoever it is. I know the right people to call and the way to handle the situation. I have the confidence to be able to do that and not feel like I'm offending anybody and not feel like I'm upsetting, the chain of balance. Um,
Yeah.
and then you ask how I sleep at night with a fan, and my
Nice.
air is set at 67.
Got it. Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. I understand people are going to be dropping for other meetings and things like that, but I do want to get into what are the top three lessons that you would give to any organization for defenses
Mm-hmm.
for voice-based social engineering? And I want you to hit on a few different topics. End users. What would you say to end users? Here's how you defend yourself. But what also would you say to the organization in terms of things like good verification checks? What's a good verification check versus a bad verification check?
Yeah. So for end users training, I know there's a big debate right now about, oh, end user training is a waste of time. I know that that seems to have been the debate on Twitter X
Yeah.
for a while now. There's still good to that. You
Yeah.
still need to train your users because at the end of the day, the users are still often the weakest link. So people don't know. Okay. And I know we're going a little over time, and I'm sorry for all the ranting. Y'all just bear with me. This is something near and dear to my heart. Um, a lot of people have not been exposed to what I hate to say, the evils of the world, right? A lot of people have never been exposed to the bad guys. They've never really seen the bad stuff out in the world. Most people are just kind of locked in, just navigating the world. They have their patterns, they have their things that they do, go to work, go to soccer practice, whatever, and repeat, repeat, repeat. So when we go in and we say, hey, this needs to be tested, it is the responsibility of the company to ensure that these users that may not be exposed to this on a day-to-day basis know how to handle it, right? So
Mhm.
train your users, have role play calls set up, have recorded calls. If you bring in a company like us and you go in and you say, come do some social engineering, record some of those calls and play them back for users.
Yeah.
Whether it be in an email or a big symposium, everybody sits down and has a brown bag lunch. Have one of us come in and talk about the dangers of it, whatever it is, and just keep harping on your users. Listen, at the end of the day, no is a powerful word. It's okay to say no. It's okay to hang up the phone. You're not going to offend anybody. We want you safe. We want your information safe. We want the company safe. So it is your job as an organization to empower your users. And what does that look like? Training. I still believe in training. Listening to those recorded calls, showing the potential damage that could be done, not scaring them, but showing them like, this could be a real thing that could
Sure.
happen if this isn't
Sure.
it. And then reward, right? We like to reward. Everyone likes to receive rewards. If a user does something well, they report a phishing link. They call the help desk and say, hey, this was a weird call I got, whatever. Reward them, publicly acknowledge, hey, Christina over there did a really good job. She called the help desk and did all the things we wanted her to do. So we bought her lunch today, right?
Yeah.
That inspires other people too to go, you know what? I need to step up my game a little bit and pay a little closer attention to this because I'd love a free lunch. So that's for the end users. For the help desk verification questions, you need to make them as hard as possible for a regular user to figure out, or a regular person on the internet to figure out, right? It needs to be information that you call to verify that is not easily accessible to normal humans.
Hmm.
Internal information only. Things like the last four of a user's social security number is fantastic. Most people should only know that and keep that to themselves. Um, Employee IDs, as long as they're not publicly accessible, that's another great one. What's your employee ID? The last four of your social. Birth dates, nah, they're okay. You can usually find that on Facebook. Um, and then another popular one I see is things like supervisor's name or date of last hire. Those are not very good. I would kind of steer away from and shy away from those. You want
What
to
about
use
code of the day?
so code of the day was a thing about a decade or so ago. And the problem with code of the day is because we are a mostly remote workforce now, and people are coming in at different times and they're working in
Mhm.
different areas of the world and things like that. It's much harder to get that information out and have everybody use that code of the day and know that's the code of the day because some people aren't even paying attention to their emails. Some people may be off,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So that one's much, much harder. It used to be more effective. But companies are so large now and so spread out that it's much harder to disseminate that information accurately and then
Mhm.
relay it back. And then again, that's something in an email. If I
Yeah.
pop your email, I get the code of the day. So
Yeah, and just from my standpoint, I would say things like for verification questions, don't ask for things like, what's your favorite color, for security
yeah,
questions. That's my all-time favorite because nobody chooses like sand dollar white, right? It's always a primary color.
it's always a
Um,
primary color.
yeah, and like code of the day, you and I were on a call once where you were talking through a lady about getting code execution on her box, and I just kind of sat back in awe because I was listening to you establish rapport with this person. She was very sweet, very very honest and very trusting, and so David here's walking her through the steps, and we get to right before she has to press enter and says, "Do I need to ask you for the code of the day?" And then laughs, and David's like, here's what he said. This guy right here, ladies and gentlemen, he said, "No, but I'm going to send you a $5 Starbucks gift card because that was the right thing to say." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" Some people's kids. I can't take this guy anymore. So, I think we are about ready to wrap up.
Yeah.
This has been a fantastic call, David. Thank you so much for getting on, sharing your expertise. And again, thank you everyone, all the participants for joining. We'll be having more webinars soon, but as of right now, we'll be signing off. So hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you all and stay out of trouble.
Later.